I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would marry someone for revenge, but here I am, wearing a white dress for the second time this year, walking down the aisle toward a man 30 years my senior, watching my sister's face drain of all color from the front row. 3 months ago, I was planning the happiest day of my life. 3 months ago, I thought Marcus was the love of my life. 3 months ago, I believed my sister Sarah was my best friend and maid of honor. I was so naive. The discovery happened on what should have been the most routine Tuesday of my life. I was working late at the marketing firm, trying to finish a campaign proposal that had been eating at me for weeks. My head was pounding, and I'd forgotten my phone charger at home. Again. Marcus was always teasing me about being scatterbrained with technology, but in that moment, I was grateful for my forgetfulness. If I hadn't needed to go home early to grab my charger, I never would have seen what I saw. The house we shared, the house where we'd planned our future, where we'd picked out paint colors for the nursery we'd dreamed about, was supposed to be empty. Marcus had told me he was working late at his construction job, some emergency repair that couldn't wait until morning. Sarah had mentioned she was having dinner with her college friends, some reunion thing I'd begged off because of my deadline. But as I pulled into our driveway, I saw Sarah's red Honda Civic parked around the corner. Not unusual, she visited often. Too often, I now realize. My heart didn't even skip a beat. Why would it? She was my sister, my maid of honor, the person who'd helped me pick out my wedding dress just 2 weeks earlier, crying actual tears when I stepped out of the dressing room. I used my key quietly, not wanting to interrupt whatever surprise they might be planning. Sarah was always organizing little things, surprise birthday parties, random gifts, spontaneous celebrations. I figured they were probably planning something for the wedding, maybe going through details Marcus wanted to keep secret. The living room was empty, but I could hear voices upstairs, soft voices, intimate voices. My stomach clenched with a feeling I couldn't name yet. My rational mind was still making excuses. Maybe Sarah was helping Marcus with wedding planning. Maybe they were wrapping gifts. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for why my fiancé and my sister were alone in my house, in what sounded like my bedroom, speaking in whispers. I climbed the stairs slowly, my bare feet silent on the hardwood we'd refinished together last spring. Each step felt like walking through water, everything slowing down as my brain tried to process what my instincts already knew. The bedroom door was cracked open maybe 2 inches. Just enough. I've replayed this moment 1,000 times in my head, and I still can't decide if I wish I'd turned around and left, or if I'm grateful I finally saw the truth. Because what I saw through that crack destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life, but it also set me free in ways I couldn't imagine. Sarah was sitting on the edge of my bed, our bed, the bed Marcus and I had picked out together, the bed where he'd proposed just 8 months earlier, wearing nothing but Marcus's construction company t-shirt. My construction company t-shirt, technically, since I'd bought it for him as a joke gift last Christmas. Marcus was standing in front of her, still fully clothed, but his hands were tangled in her hair. The same dark hair we'd inherited from our mother, the same hair she'd worn in an elaborate updo when she'd been my maid of honor at my first wedding dress fitting. "We have to stop this," she was saying, but her voice carried no conviction. Her hands were on his belt buckle, contradicting every word. "The wedding is in 6 weeks. If she finds out, she won't find out," Marcus replied, and his voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Rougher, more passionate. The way he'd never sounded when he spoke to me, not even during our most intimate moments. "She's so buried in work, she barely notices what's happening around her anyway." The words hit me like physical blows. Each one landed somewhere in my chest, creating a pain I'd never experienced before. But what came next was worse. "I love you," Sarah whispered, and Marcus responded by kissing her with an intensity that told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, maybe 30 minutes. Time had become meaningless. I watched the man I was supposed to marry in 6 weeks, the man I'd been with for 3 years, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me for the rest of our lives, pour his soul into kissing my sister. My sister who'd helped me address wedding invitations. My sister who'd thrown me a bridal shower just last month. My sister who'd listened to me worry about wedding details and whether Marcus and I were really ready for marriage, all while she was apparently answering that question for us. I backed away from the door slowly, carefully, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. But they were lost in each other, completely oblivious to my presence. Just like they'd apparently been oblivious to my feelings, my trust, my love, for however long this had been going on. I made it downstairs and out of the house without making a sound. Muscle memory guided me to my car. Muscle memory started the engine and pulled me out of the driveway. I drove for 2 hours without any destination, just moving, just breathing, just trying to process what felt like the complete destruction of my reality. When I finally stopped, I was sitting in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner I'd never been to, 20 miles from home. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence, waiting for the tears to come. They didn't. Instead, something cold and sharp settled in my chest, something that felt like clarity, like purpose, like the beginning of a plan I didn't even know I was forming yet. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Robert Chen, Marcus's father. Robert and I had always gotten along well, better than well, actually. From the first time Marcus brought me home to meet his parents, Robert and I had connected over books, over philosophy, over long conversations about life and meaning that Marcus never seemed interested in joining. Robert was recently divorced. Marcus's mother had left him for another man 2 years ago, a betrayal that had shattered Robert's faith in marriage and love. Robert was handsome in a distinguished way that Marcus had never quite grown into. Where Marcus was all rough edges and construction worker hands, Robert was refined, intellectual, successful. He ran his own architectural firm, designed beautiful homes, spoke 3 languages, and had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from being truly comfortable with yourself. Marcus had always been a little jealous of how easily his father and I talked, how we could spend hours discussing books he'd never read, ideas he'd never considered. "You two are like some kind of intellectual, mutual admiration society." He'd complained more than once, usually when he felt left out of our conversations. Now, sitting in that diner parking lot, I realized that Robert might be the key to everything. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to know how long this betrayal had been going on, how deep it went, how many people in my life had been lying to me. I drove home, parked a block away, and waited. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah's car appeared around the corner. She drove slowly, carefully, like someone trying not to be noticed. I watched her park and sit in her car for several minutes, probably checking her appearance, probably making sure she looked innocent. Marcus's truck was already gone from the driveway when I finally went inside. The house felt different now, contaminated somehow. The couch where we'd planned our honeymoon, the kitchen table where we'd discussed our future children, the bed where they'd just been together, everything felt like evidence of a life that had never been real. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my laptop and began investigating my own life like I was solving a crime. I started with phone records. Marcus and I shared a phone plan, so accessing his records was easy. The number that appeared most frequently over the past 6 months, starting just 2 weeks after our engagement, was Sarah's. Dozens of calls, hundreds of texts, always when he was supposed to be at work, always when I was busy with my own job. Then I went through our credit card statements with new eyes. The charges I'd assumed were work-related suddenly told a different story. Restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in towns where Marcus claimed to be working construction jobs, jewelry purchases I'd never received. By dawn, I had built a timeline of their affair. 6 months. It had been going on for 6 months, starting almost immediately after our engagement. Every milestone in our wedding planning had been shadowed by their betrayal. Every dress fitting, every cake tasting, every decision about our future had been made while they were falling in love behind my back. The cruelest part was realizing how many times they'd been together in my presence. Family dinners where they'd barely looked at each other, carefully avoiding the slightest hint of intimacy. Wedding planning sessions where Sarah had been the perfect supportive sister, asking all the right questions, offering all the right advice, all while knowing she was going to be sleeping with my husband within hours. I thought about confronting them. I imagined the scene a dozen different ways, bursting in on them the next time, calling them both and demanding an explanation, showing up at Marcus's worksite with printouts of phone records and credit card statements. But every scenario ended the same way, with me as the victim, the betrayed fiancé, the woman who'd been foolish enough to trust the 2 people closest to her. They'd be embarrassed, maybe even sorry, but I'd be the one left to pick up the pieces of my life while they rode off into their sunset of true love. That's when the other plan began to form. I was making coffee and thinking about Robert, how kind he'd been to me, how he'd always seemed to understand me in ways Marcus never did, how he'd mentioned more than once that he wished he'd met someone like me when he was my age, when the idea hit me like lightning. What if Marcus wasn't the only Chen man I could marry? The thought should have seemed crazy, inappropriate, impossible. But sitting there in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, it felt like pure genius. Robert was single, successful, and genuinely interested in me as a person. He was also, I'd always noticed, exactly the kind of man I'd be attracted to if he weren't my fiancé's father. The age difference was significant. Robert was 55 to my 28, but not scandalous. And he was everything Marcus wasn't. Educated, cultured, emotionally intelligent, financially stable. But more than that, marrying Robert would accomplish something that simply confronting Marcus and Sarah never could. It would make me family. It would make me Sarah's stepmother-in-law. It would turn the power dynamic completely upside down. Instead of being the heartbroken ex-fiancé they'd betrayed, I'd be the woman who'd upgraded to a better version of Marcus in every possible way. I'd be the one with the beautiful house, the successful husband, the position of authority in family gatherings. I'd be the one who got the last laugh. The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. Robert had always been attracted to me. I could see it in the way he looked at me, the way he found excuses to start conversations, the way he lit up when I shared his interests in ways his son never did. He was lonely, still hurt from his divorce, still looking for someone who truly understood him. And I genuinely cared about Robert. This wouldn't be a completely cold-blooded manipulation. I'd always enjoyed his company, always found him more intellectually stimulating than Marcus, always wondered what my life might have been like if I'd met him first. But I needed to be smart about this. I needed to be strategic, careful, methodical. If I was going to pull this off, I couldn't let my emotions drive the process. I needed to approach this like the marketing campaign it essentially was, selling Robert Chen on the idea of a relationship with me, while simultaneously extracting myself from my current situation without revealing what I knew. The first step was ending my engagement to Marcus without telling him why. I waited 3 days, gathering my courage and refining my plan. During those 3 days, I watched Marcus lie to me repeatedly. He told me about construction delays that I knew were actually afternoon rendezvous with Sarah. He claimed overtime shifts that coincided exactly with Sarah's evening yoga classes. He even brought me flowers one night, probably out of guilt, and kissed me with the same mouth that had been all over my sister just hours earlier. Sarah was worse somehow. She called me every day, chattering about wedding details, asking about my dress fittings, offering to help with last-minute planning. Her voice was bright and loving and sisterly, giving no hint that she was systematically destroying my life. On Friday evening, I made my move. "Marcus, we need to talk," I said when he came home from work. Real work, for once, I'd checked. He immediately looked nervous, which told me everything about his guilty conscience. "Sure, babe. What's up?" "I think we should postpone the wedding." The relief that flashed across his face before he managed to look concerned was almost comical. "Postpone? Why? What's wrong?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our relationship, about whether we're really ready for this," I said, keeping my voice steady and reasonable. "And I realize I need some time to figure out what I really want. Amy, if this is about work stress or the wedding planning getting overwhelming, we can work through that," he said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. He was already seeing his way out. "It's not about stress. It's about whether I'm marrying you for the right reasons, or just because we've been together for so long that it feels like the next logical step." This was actually true in a way. I had been having doubts about Marcus for months, doubts I'd pushed aside because I thought they were just pre-wedding nerves. Now I realized those doubts had been my instincts trying to tell me what my conscious mind wasn't ready to accept. "So what are you saying exactly?" Marcus asked. "I'm saying I need space. I need time to think without the pressure of wedding planning and family expectations. I want to take a break." "A break," he repeated, and I could practically see him calculating how much freedom this would give him to pursue things with Sarah. "I think I should move out for a while. Maybe stay with friends or find a short-term rental, just until I can sort through my feelings." "Amy," he started, but his protest was half-hearted at best. "I know it sounds crazy, and I know the timing is terrible, but I can't marry you feeling this uncertain. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." Marcus tried to look disappointed, but mostly he looked relieved. We spent another hour talking through the logistics. I'd move out over the weekend. We'd tell our families we were postponing for personal reasons. We'd figure out how to handle the vendors and deposits later. He offered to let me stay in the house, but I insisted I needed complete space to think clearly. What I really needed was freedom to execute the next phase of my plan without him monitoring my every move. Sarah called me within 2 hours of Marcus telling her about our break. She was immediately sympathetic, offering to let me stay with her, bringing over ice cream and wine and tissues for the heartbreak she assumed I was experiencing. "I can't believe you're postponing," she said, settling onto my couch with a concerned expression that deserves an Oscar. "You two seem so perfect together." "Do we, though?" I asked, testing her reaction. "I mean, really? Or do we just seem comfortable?" "Amy, every couple has doubts before their wedding. It's totally normal. Is it normal to feel like your fiancé doesn't really see you? Like he's more interested in the idea of being married than in actually being married to you specifically?" Sarah's face flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when's the last time Marcus and I had a real conversation about something that mattered? When's the last time he asked me about my dreams or my fears or what I really think about anything important?" "He loves you," Sarah said, but her voice was weaker now. "Does he? Or does he love the convenient, uncomplicated version of me that doesn't ask too many questions or expect too much from him?" I was describing the version of me that had been blind to his affair, but Sarah didn't know that. She just heard me expressing doubts about Marcus's capacity for deep love, doubts that probably echoed her own thoughts about whether what she and Marcus had was really sustainable. "Maybe some time apart will help you both figure out what you really want," she said finally. "Maybe it will," I agreed. That weekend, I moved out of the house I'd shared with Marcus and into a furnished apartment across town. I told everyone I needed space to think about my future, which was completely true. I just didn't mention that the future I was contemplating involved becoming my sister's stepmother. Phase 2 of my plan began the following Monday. I called Robert's architectural firm and asked if I could schedule a meeting to discuss a potential home renovation project. This wasn't entirely fabricated. My new apartment was temporary, and I was genuinely thinking about what kind of place I wanted to live in long term. "Amy!" Robert's voice was warm and surprised when his secretary connected us. "I heard about you and Marcus taking some time apart. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, actually. Better than I expected. That's part of why I'm calling. I'm thinking about what I want my life to look like going forward, and that includes thinking about what kind of home I want to create for myself." "That sounds very healthy and forward-thinking," he said, and I could hear the approval in his voice. Robert had always respected my independence and ambition. "I'd be happy to help however I can." "Did you want to talk about renovation, or are you thinking about building something new?" "I'm not sure yet. I was hoping you could help me think through the options." "Of course. Why don't you come by the office this week? We can look at some possibilities together." "I'd love that. But Robert, can we keep this between us for now? I don't want Marcus to feel like I'm trying to involve his family in our personal situation." "Absolutely. This is between you and me." I scheduled the appointment for Thursday afternoon, which gave me time to prepare. I spent the next few days researching architectural trends, reading about home design philosophy, preparing myself to have the kind of intelligent conversation that Robert would find engaging and attractive. I also spent time thinking about my appearance, not in a shallow way but strategically. Robert had always seen me in casual clothes at family gatherings, or dressed up for special occasions when I was clearly Marcus's girlfriend. I needed him to see me differently now, as an independent woman, as someone sophisticated enough to be his partner rather than his son's discarded fiancé. I chose a navy blue dress that was professional but feminine, paired with heels that made me tall enough to look Robert in the eye. I wore my hair down instead of in the ponytail I usually favored, and I chose jewelry that was elegant but understated. When I walked into Robert's office that Thursday, I saw him react to my appearance in exactly the way I'd hoped. His eyes widened slightly, and he took just a moment too long to greet me, like he was seeing me for the first time. "Amy, you look," he started, then caught himself. "You look well. I'm glad you're taking care of yourself during this difficult time." "Thank you. It's been easier than I expected, actually. I think I needed this space more than I realized." Robert's office was beautiful, all clean lines and natural light, filled with architectural models and design books. We sat at his conference table, and I watched him transform into the professional architect, pulling out portfolios and sketching ideas as we talked. "What kind of feeling are you looking for in your home?" he asked, his pencil moving across the paper as he spoke. I want something that feels like me, I said. Warm but sophisticated, comfortable but beautiful. A place where I can entertain, where I can have deep conversations with people I care about. That sounds like you, he said with a smile. You've always struck me as someone who creates that kind of atmosphere wherever you are. We spent 2 hours talking about floor plans and architectural styles, but more than that, we talked about philosophy of space, about how our environments shape our lives, about the kind of person I wanted to become. It was the kind of conversation I'd always wished I could have with Marcus, the kind of intellectual intimacy that had been missing from my relationship. As we talked, I watched Robert relax, become more animated, more engaged. He was clearly enjoying himself, clearly attracted to the ideas I was sharing and the way I was responding to his expertise. You know, he said as we were wrapping up, most of my clients come in with a budget and a timeline and a list of requirements. You're the first person who's ever asked me to help them design a space that reflects who they want to become. Well, I'm in a period of becoming, I said. I figure the space should support that process. That's actually quite profound, he said, and the way he looked at me made my heart race in a way it never had with Marcus. We scheduled a follow-up meeting for the following week, and Robert walked me to the elevator. As we waited for it to arrive, he seemed to be working up the courage to say something. Amy, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you seem different, stronger somehow, more yourself. I think I am more myself, I said. Maybe this break is helping me remember who I am when I'm not trying to be who someone else needs me to be. The elevator arrived, and as I stepped inside, Robert said, Marcus is an idiot if he doesn't fight to get you back. The doors closed before I could respond, but I smiled all the way down to the parking garage. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert and I met 3 more times to discuss my fictional home renovation project. Each meeting was longer than the last, each conversation more personal, more intimate. We talked about books, about travel, about philosophy, about our dreams for the future. I learned that Robert had always wanted to design houses for people who really understood architecture, not just clients who wanted the biggest possible house for their budget. I learned that he'd been lonely since his divorce, that he'd started to believe he'd never find someone who shared his intellectual interests and emotional depth. I shared my own dreams about wanting to build a marketing firm that specialized in sustainable architecture, about wanting to travel to see the world's most beautiful buildings, about wanting a partner who could engage with ideas and emotions with equal facility. You should do that, Robert said during our 4th meeting. Start that firm. You have the vision for it and the intelligence to make it work. You really think so? I know so. In fact, I'd love to be one of your first clients. I've been thinking about rebranding my firm, and I've never worked with a marketer who actually understood what I'm trying to achieve architecturally. This was perfect. A professional collaboration would give us legitimate reasons to spend time together, would allow our relationship to deepen naturally without raising suspicions. I'd love that, I said. But I should probably wait until my personal life is more settled before taking on new professional challenges. How are things going with that? Robert asked, and his voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the personal interest in his eyes. Marcus and I are supposed to have dinner this weekend to talk about where we stand, I said. This was true. Marcus had suggested the dinner, probably hoping to officially end our engagement so he could be with Sarah without guilt. And how do you feel about that? I paused, as if I was really thinking about it, as if the answer wasn't already completely clear to me. Honestly, I keep waiting to miss him and I don't. I keep thinking I should be heartbroken and I'm not. Mostly I just feel free. Free can be a good feeling, Robert said quietly. It is. It's also a little scary. Like if I wasn't actually happy with Marcus, what does that say about my judgment? What does that say about what I really want? Maybe it says you're growing into someone who knows herself better, Robert suggested. Maybe it says you're ready for something more than what you had. The way he was looking at me made it clear that he was hoping to be part of that something more. That weekend, I had dinner with Marcus at a restaurant we'd never been to together. I wanted neutral territory for what I knew would be our final conversation as a couple. Marcus was nervous, fidgeting with his menu, avoiding eye contact. He'd probably spent the week planning this conversation with Sarah, figuring out how to break up with me gently so he could be with her without feeling like a complete villain. So, he said after we'd ordered, how have you been feeling about everything? Clear, I said. Clearer than I've felt in a long time. Clear about what? About us. About what I want. About what kind of life I'm actually trying to build. Marcus relaxed visibly. And what kind of life is that? One where I'm with someone who really sees me. Someone who's interested in my thoughts, not just my ability to support his life. Someone who challenges me intellectually and emotionally. I watched Marcus process this, watched him realize that I was describing everything he wasn't and had never been. Amy, It's okay, Marcus. I think you've been feeling the same way about us. Comfortable but not passionate. Compatible on paper but not really connected. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I do love you, but maybe not in the way you deserve to be loved. And maybe I don't love you in the way you deserve to be loved either, I said, which was generous of me considering. We spent the rest of dinner working out the logistics of our official breakup. We'd tell people we'd realized we wanted different things, that we'd grown apart, that we'd decided to end things amicably before we made a mistake we'd both regret. It was all very mature and civilized. Marcus even insisted on paying for dinner, probably out of guilt over the affair I wasn't supposed to know about. I hope we can still be friends, he said as we left the restaurant. Of course, I lied. You'll always be important to me? That night, I called Sarah to tell her about the breakup. She tried to sound surprised and sympathetic, but I could hear the barely contained excitement in her voice. Are you okay? She asked. Do you want me to come over? I'm okay, actually. Sad, but also relieved. I think this is the right decision for both of us. If you need anything at all, you know I'm here for you. I know. You're the best sister anyone could ask for. The irony was apparently lost on her. Phase 3 of my plan began the next morning. I called Robert and asked if he'd like to have coffee to discuss the marketing project we'd talked about. I know the timing might seem strange, right after my breakup with Marcus, but honestly, throwing myself into work feels like exactly what I need right now. Are you sure you're ready for that? He asked, but I could hear the hope in his voice. I'm sure. I feel like I've been putting my life on hold for too long. It's time to start building the future I actually want. We met at a coffee shop near his office, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and local artwork. It felt intimate and sophisticated, the kind of place where adults had meaningful conversations about their lives and dreams. Robert was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a notebook and what looked like architectural sketches spread out in front of him. I've been thinking about your idea, he said as I sat down. And I think you're on to something revolutionary. For the next hour, we talked about his vision for sustainable, emotionally intelligent architecture and my ideas for marketing that focused on lifestyle and values rather than just square footage and amenities. We were building something together, creating a collaboration that would change both of our professional lives. But more than that, we were building a connection. Every shared idea, every moment of understanding, every laugh over coffee was another thread in the web I was weaving around us. You know, Robert said as we were getting ready to leave, I haven't felt this excited about work in years. You've reminded me why I became an architect in the first place. You've reminded me that there are people in the world who care about the same things I care about, I replied. We walked to the parking garage together, and when we reached my car, Robert hesitated. Amy, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Not for work, just because I enjoy talking with you. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. I'd like that very much. But Robert, I should probably mention that things are still a little complicated with my family situation. I don't want to create any awkwardness with Marcus. Marcus and I are adults, Robert said firmly. And you're not his property. You're allowed to have your own relationships, your own life. You're right, I said, as if I was just realizing this. I've been so worried about everyone else's feelings that I forgot to consider my own. What are your own feelings? He asked quietly. I looked into his eyes, intelligent, kind, genuinely interested in my answer, and told him a version of the truth. My feelings are that you're one of the most interesting, thoughtful people I've ever met. My feelings are that talking with you makes me excited about possibilities I hadn't even considered before. My feelings are that I'd very much like to have dinner with you. Robert smiled and it transformed his entire face. Then let's have dinner. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, I agreed. Our first date was perfect. Robert took me to a small restaurant with incredible food and an atmosphere that encouraged long, intimate conversations. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our career ambitions, our philosophies about life and love, and what it means to build a meaningful existence. I learned that Robert had always felt like an outsider in his own family, too intellectual for his blue-collar parents, too emotional for his pragmatic ex-wife. He'd spent most of his adult life feeling like he was performing a version of himself that other people found acceptable, rather than being truly understood. I told him about feeling invisible in my relationship with Marcus, about realizing that I'd been trying to make myself smaller and simpler to fit into his world, about discovering that I was ready for a relationship based on mutual fascination rather than just mutual convenience. "You know what's funny?" Robert said as we shared dessert. "I always thought Marcus was lucky to be with you, but I assumed you were just being polite when you seemed interested in our conversations. I thought someone your age, with your energy and ambition, would find me boring." "Boring?" I laughed. "Robert, you're the opposite of boring. You're the first person I've met who makes me want to be smarter, more thoughtful, more engaged with the world." "You do the same for me," he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You make me feel like the person I always hoped I could be." That night, Robert walked me to my apartment door, but we didn't kiss. We were both aware that we were crossing into emotional territory that would change everything, and we wanted to be sure, wanted to be careful, wanted to do this right. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "So would I. How about this weekend? I could cook for you. I actually make a decent Italian meal." "I'd love that." We had 3 more dates before we kissed, and when we finally did, it was nothing like the comfortable, familiar kisses I'd shared with Marcus. This was electric, transformative, the kind of kiss that makes you understand why people write songs about love. We were standing in Robert's kitchen after a dinner he'd cooked for me, talking about a book we'd both read, when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence and said, "Amy, I need to tell you something." My heart stopped for a moment, wondering if somehow he'd figured out that I knew about Marcus and Sarah, if he'd realized this was all calculated revenge. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. "I know it's fast, I know the situation is complicated, but I can't pretend these feelings aren't real." The relief was overwhelming. "Robert," I said, reaching up to touch his face, "I'm falling in love with you too." When he kissed me, it felt like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time. It felt like everything I'd been missing with Marcus, everything I'd been too afraid to admit I wanted. That night, we made love with a passion and tenderness that made me understand why my relationship with Marcus had always felt like something was missing. This was what it felt like to be truly seen, truly desired, truly cherished by someone who understood every part of who you were. Afterward, we lay in Robert's bed talking about our future. He wanted to travel with me, to show me the architectural wonders of the world. He wanted to collaborate professionally, to build something meaningful together. He wanted to wake up every morning knowing he was with someone who challenged him to be his best self. I wanted all of those things too. But I also wanted something else, something I couldn't tell him about yet. I wanted to walk into family gatherings as Robert's wife, watching Marcus and Sarah's faces as they realized what I'd done. I wanted to hold family dinners in my beautiful home, playing the role of the gracious stepmother-in-law, while Sarah struggled to call me by my new title. I wanted to be the woman who'd turned their betrayal into my triumph, who'd upgraded from the son to the father, who'd transformed their love story into my revenge plot. But those were thoughts for later. For now, I was content to lie in Robert's arms, planning the future we were going to build together, one that would be everything my life with Marcus never could have been. 3 weeks later, Robert told me he wanted me to meet his parents. "They're going to love you," he said. "My mother especially. She's been worried that I'd never find someone who really got me." "What about Marcus?" I asked, as if I was concerned about the family dynamics, rather than strategically planning my next move. "What about him? You were engaged to him, now you're not. Now you're with me. It's not that complicated. But won't it be awkward? Won't your parents think it's strange?" Robert was quiet for a moment, considering this. "Amy, do you want to be with me?" "Of course I do." "Then that's all that matters. My parents will see how happy you make me, and they'll be happy for us. As for Marcus," Robert shrugged. "He had his chance to build a life with you, and he chose not to take it seriously. That's his loss and my gain. If only he knew how right he was." The family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. Robert's parents lived in a beautiful house that Robert had designed for them, and I made sure to spend extra time getting ready, choosing an outfit that was elegant but not trying too hard, sophisticated but still warm and approachable. I arrived at Robert's apartment an hour early so we could drive over together. He was nervous, which was endearing. I just want them to see how incredible you are, he said, adjusting his tie for the third time. They will, I assured him, and I meant it. I'd been preparing for this performance for weeks. Marcus's truck was already in the driveway when we pulled up, which meant he was there with Sarah. Perfect. I'd been hoping they'd both be there for maximum impact. Robert's mother, Elena, answered the door with a huge smile. You must be Amy. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope, I said, giving her the kind of warm, genuine smile that had always made people like me. All wonderful things. Robert hasn't stopped talking about you since your first date. Robert's father, David, appeared behind Elena, and I could see where Robert got his thoughtful intelligence. Amy, welcome to our home. We're so glad to finally meet you. The living room was filled with family photos and architectural awards, and sitting on the couch were Marcus and Sarah, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. Marcus, I said with perfect calm, as if running into my ex-fiancé at his father's house was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah, what a nice surprise. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Sarah's face had gone completely white, but she managed to stammer out, Amy, why are you— Amy is my girlfriend, Robert said proudly, putting his arm around me in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. I wanted you all to meet the woman I'm falling in love with. The silence that followed was everything I'd hoped for, and more. Marcus stared at us like he was trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't quite comprehend. Sarah looked back and forth between me and Robert, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Elena and David, bless them, seemed completely oblivious to the undercurrents of drama and just looked delighted that Robert had found someone who made him happy. Well, this is wonderful, Elena exclaimed. Isn't it wonderful, David? Robert has found such a lovely young woman. It certainly is, David agreed. Amy, Robert tells us you're in marketing and that you two are working on some projects together? We are, I said, slipping naturally into the conversation while Marcus and Sarah continued to stare. Robert has such an incredible vision for sustainable architecture, and I'm hoping to help him share that vision with people who really appreciate beautiful, meaningful design. For the next hour, I charmed Robert's parents completely. I asked thoughtful questions about their home, complimented Elena's cooking, discussed literature with David, and generally behaved like the perfect girlfriend meeting her boyfriend's family for the first time. Marcus barely spoke during dinner, pushing food around his plate and shooting confused glances at his father and me. Sarah tried to engage in normal conversation, but her voice was strained and her smiles looked painted on. The real moment I'd been waiting for came when Elena was showing me family photos after dinner. Oh, here's a picture from Marcus's engagement party, she said, pulling out a photo of Marcus and me from just a few months earlier. Such a shame that didn't work out. But I have to say, Amy, you seem much happier now. More yourself somehow. I am happier, I said, glancing at Marcus, who was standing close enough to hear. Sometimes things don't work out the way you plan them, but they work out the way they're supposed to. Robert is so much more mature than Marcus, Elena continued, apparently not noticing that her younger son was within earshot. He's ready for a real partnership, a real marriage. Marcus is still figuring out what he wants. Marcus made a strangled sound and excused himself to the bathroom. Sarah followed him a few minutes later, probably to have a panicked conversation about what my relationship with Robert meant for them. I spent the rest of the evening being the perfect girlfriend, helping Elena with the dishes, discussing architectural theory with David, and gazing at Robert with the kind of adoration that convinced everyone present that we were genuinely, deeply in love. Which, surprisingly, we were. When it was time to leave, Elena hugged me goodbye and whispered, I've never seen Robert this happy. Thank you for bringing out the best in him. He brings out the best in me too, I said, and it was completely true. As we walked to the car, Robert was practically glowing. That went perfectly. They adore you. I adore them too, I said. Your family is wonderful. I didn't mention that 2 members of his family had looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor for most of the evening. That night, as Robert and I lay in bed talking about how well the evening had gone, he said something that made my heart race for entirely different reasons than his usual sweet words. Amy, I know this might seem fast, but I've been thinking about our future together. What kind of future? The kind where we don't have to say goodbye at the end of every evening. The kind where we wake up together every morning. The kind where we build a life together officially. I turned to face him in the darkness. Robert, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I want to marry you. I know it's soon. I know people will think we're crazy, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was it. This was the moment my revenge plot became reality. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I want to marry you too." When Robert kissed me, it was with the passion of a man who'd just heard his dreams come true. And as I kissed him back, I realized that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being just about revenge. I was genuinely, completely, overwhelmingly in love with Robert Chen. The fact that marrying him would make me Sarah's stepmother-in-law was just the most delicious bonus imaginable. Robert proposed officially 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in his kitchen while we were making breakfast together. It wasn't planned or elaborate. He just stopped in the middle of flipping pancakes, turned to me with flour in his hair and said, "Amy, I can't wait another day to ask you this properly." He got down on one knee right there on the kitchen floor, pulling out a ring that was absolutely perfect, an Art Deco sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique and nothing like the generic solitaire Marcus had given me. "Amy Charlotte Morrison, will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy?" "Yes," I said, and when he slipped the ring onto my finger, it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Robert paid attention to details. Robert noticed things. Robert had somehow figured out my exact ring size without ever asking, probably from observing me during one of our many dinners together. The pancakes burned while we kissed and planned our future, but neither of us cared. We were too busy being deliriously happy, too caught up in the intoxicating rush of knowing we were going to build a life together. "When?" Robert asked, holding me close. "How soon can we make this official?" "As soon as possible," I said, meaning it completely. I don't want a long engagement. I don't want to wait to start our real life together. "Good," he said, kissing my forehead. Because I was thinking the same thing. Maybe we could plan something for this fall? Something small and intimate? Perfect. I agreed, already imagining the look on Sarah's face when she received our wedding invitation. We decided to tell his parents first, then mine, then the rest of the family. Robert was practically vibrating with excitement as we drove to his parents' house that afternoon. "They're going to be so happy," he kept saying. "Mom has been worried about me being alone, and Dad has always said he wanted me to find someone who shared my interests." Elena cried when we told her, actual tears of joy streaming down her face as she hugged us both. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "I could see it at dinner last week. You two are perfect for each other." David was more reserved, but equally pleased. "Robert, I've never seen you like this," he said, shaking his son's hand. "Amy, welcome to the family. Officially this time. We should have an engagement party," Elena announced immediately. "Something to celebrate properly. When were you thinking of having the wedding?" "Soon," Robert said, squeezing my hand. "We don't want to wait." "How soon is soon?" Elena asked. "October," I said. "Maybe mid-October if we can pull everything together by then." "October." Elena looked delighted. "That's perfect." Fall weddings are so romantic. It wasn't until we were about to leave that Elena asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Should we call Marcus and let him know, or do you want to tell him yourselves?" Robert and I exchanged a look. We'd discussed this on the drive over, how to handle the potentially awkward family dynamics, how to make sure everyone understood that this was serious and permanent, not some rebound relationship. "We'll tell him," Robert said. "And Amy should probably tell her family too." "Of course, dear," Elena said. "I'm sure everyone will be happy for you once they see how perfect you are together." That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the engagement. They were surprised but supportive. They'd always liked Robert during the few times they'd met him at family gatherings, and they'd been worried about me since the breakup with Marcus. "Are you sure you're ready for this, sweetheart?" my mother asked. "It's only been a few months since you and Marcus broke up." "I'm sure, Mom," I said. "I know it seems fast, but when you know, you know." "And you know?" "I know." My mother was quiet for a moment. "What about Sarah? How does she feel about all this?" This was the question I'd been preparing for. "I haven't told her yet," I said. "I wanted to tell you and Dad first. But Mom, Sarah and I haven't been as close lately. I think she's been dealing with some things, and we've kind of grown apart." This was technically true. Sarah had been distant and weird around me ever since my breakup with Marcus, probably because she was struggling with guilt over their affair, while also being excited about finally being with him openly. "That's too bad," my mother said. "You two have always been so close." "People change," I said. "But I'm happy, Mom. Happier than I've been in years." "Then we're happy for you, sweetheart." The next part of my plan required perfect timing. I needed to tell Sarah about my engagement in a way that would maximize the impact, in a setting where she couldn't have a complete meltdown without making a scene. I chose the coffee shop where Sarah and I had always met for our sister dates, the cozy place near her apartment where we'd spent countless hours talking about our lives, our dreams, our relationships. The irony of telling her there that I was marrying her boyfriend's father was too perfect to resist. "I have news," I said after we'd ordered our usual drinks and settled into our favorite corner booth. "Good news, I hope," Sarah said, and I could see her trying to read my expression. "You seem different. Happier." "I am happier," I said, extending my left hand so she could see the ring. "Robert proposed." Sarah stared at the ring for a long moment, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that looked like panic. "Robert?" she repeated, as if she didn't quite understand the words. "Robert Chen?" "Yes, Robert Chen." "Marcus's father, Robert Chen?" "Yes." "Amy, what the hell?" I kept my voice calm and reasonable, the tone of someone sharing happy news with a beloved sister. "I know it might seem surprising, but we've been seeing each other for a few months now, and we're really happy together." "A few months?" Sarah's voice was getting higher, more strained. "Amy, you just broke up with Marcus a few months ago. You were engaged to Marcus. And now I'm engaged to someone much better suited for me," I said, taking a sip of my latte. "Someone who really sees me, who appreciates me, who wants to build a life with me based on mutual respect and shared interests. But it's Marcus's father. So it's weird. It's inappropriate. Sarah was struggling to find words that would express her horror without revealing why she was really so upset. "It's what, Sarah?" "It's going to destroy Marcus." "Why would Marcus be destroyed by me finding happiness with someone else?" I asked innocently. "He and I broke up. We both agreed we weren't right for each other. Surely he wants me to be happy. But with his father?" "His father is a wonderful man," I said. "Kind, intelligent, successful, emotionally mature. Everything I was looking for in a partner." Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. "Amy, this is crazy." "You're 28 years old. He's 55. So that's a huge age gap." "It's not that unusual," I said calmly. "And frankly, Sarah, Robert is more emotionally mature and intellectually compatible with me than any man my own age I've ever met, including Marcus." "What about Marcus's feelings? What about them?" I asked. "Sarah, Marcus and I are over. We broke up because we realized we weren't right for each other. He doesn't get to have feelings about who I date or marry." "But Amy, are you happy with Marcus?" The question stopped her cold. Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times as she tried to figure out how to answer without revealing the truth. "I mean, what does Marcus have to do with this?" "You brought him up," I pointed out. "You seem very concerned about his feelings. I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that." Sarah's face flushed red. "He's my friend." "He's going to be your brother-in-law?" "Of course I'm concerned about family dynamics." "Brother-in-law," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "That's right. Marcus is going to be my stepson." The full implications of what I'd just said seemed to hit Sarah all at once. Her face went completely white, then flushed red again. "Your stepson?" she whispered. I said, stirring my latte. "It's going to be interesting navigating those family relationships, don't you think?" Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her trying to work through what this meant for her relationship with Marcus. If she was dating my stepson, what did that make me in relation to her? If Marcus was my stepson and she married him, I'd be her stepmother-in-law. The woman who had once been her little sister would suddenly outrank her in the family hierarchy. "Amy," she said finally, her voice very quiet, "are you doing this because you're angry about something?" "Angry?" I laughed, and it sounded genuine because in that moment I wasn't angry. I was triumphant. "Sarah, I'm not angry about anything. I'm in love. I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I'm marrying a man who adores me and wants to build a beautiful future together. Why would I be angry?" Sarah looked like she wanted to say something, but she couldn't figure out how to do it without admitting what she'd done. This seems so sudden. "When you meet the right person, you know," I said. "Robert and I knew almost immediately that we were meant to be together." "But Amy..." "Sarah, I really hope you can be happy for me," I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "I know this might seem complicated because of the family connections, but love is love. You of all people should understand that sometimes you can't help who you fall for." The double meaning of my words wasn't lost on her. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, and I could see her wondering if I somehow knew about her and Marcus. "Of course I'm happy for you," she said finally, but her voice was hollow. "If you're happy, then I'm happy." "Good," I said, standing up to leave. "The wedding is in October. Mid-October. I'll send you the details once we have everything planned." "October?" Sarah looked panicked. "That's so soon." "When you know, you know," I repeated. "Besides, Robert and I don't want a long engagement. We want to start our married life together." I left Sarah sitting in the coffee shop, staring at her untouched drink with the expression of someone whose entire world had just shifted on its axis. That evening, Robert and I called Marcus together to tell him about our engagement. Robert insisted we do it over the phone rather than in person, which was probably wise given how the conversation went. "You're what?" Marcus's voice crackled through the speakerphone, disbelief and something like horror evident even through the poor connection. "We're engaged," Robert repeated patiently. "Amy and I are getting married in October." "Dad, this is insane." "You can't marry Amy." "And why not?" Robert's voice was getting an edge to it. I could see him getting defensive, protective of our relationship. "Because she was my fiancé." "Was," Robert emphasized. "Past tense. You two broke up, Marcus. Amy is free to see whoever she wants." "But she's 28 years old." So you're 55? "Amy is an adult who can make her own decisions about who she wants to be with," Robert said firmly. "And she's chosen to be with me." "This is fucked up, Dad." "Watch your language," Robert snapped. "You're talking about the woman I love." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said, in a voice I'd never heard from him before, "Amy, are you there?" "I'm here, Marcus." "Why are you doing this?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications. Was he asking why I was marrying his father? Why I was moving on so quickly? Or was he asking something deeper? Did he somehow suspect that I knew about him and Sarah? "I'm doing this because I love your father," I said simply, "and because he loves me, and because we want to build a life together." "But Amy..." "Marcus, I understand this might feel strange to you, but I hope you can be happy for us." "Robert makes me happier than I've ever been." "Happier than I made you?" The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it, revealing the insecurity and guilt he was feeling. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Much happier." Another long silence. Then Marcus said, "I can't support this." "I'm sorry, but I can't." "That's your choice," Robert said, and his voice was cold now. "But Amy is going to be my wife, which makes her your stepmother. You can choose to be respectful and civil, or you can choose to stay away from family gatherings. But you cannot choose to be disrespectful to her." "My stepmother," Marcus repeated, like he was tasting the words and finding them bitter. "That's right." "Dad, this is going to ruin our family." "No, son," Robert said quietly. "Your inability to be happy for me is what's going to affect our family. Amy and I are getting married whether you approve or not. The only question is whether you're going to be part of our lives or not." Marcus hung up without saying goodbye. Robert immediately turned to me, his face full of concern. "Amy, I'm so sorry." I had no idea he'd react like that. "It's okay," I said, though my heart was racing with adrenaline and something that felt like victory. "I expected it might be difficult for him." "He'll come around," Robert said, pulling me into his arms. "Once he sees how happy we are together, once he realizes this isn't some rebound thing, he'll accept it. And if he doesn't, then that's his loss," Robert said firmly. "I'm not going to let anyone, including my son, make you feel unwelcome in this family." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding planning. Robert and I threw ourselves into creating the perfect celebration, and it was during this process that I fell even more deeply in love with him. He was involved in every decision, from the venue to the flowers to the menu. He cared about the details because he cared about making me happy. We chose a small vineyard about an hour outside the city, a place that specialized in intimate weddings with stunning views and incredible food. We decided on a guest list of about 50 people, close family and friends, the people who really mattered to us. The question of whether to invite Marcus and Sarah became a point of discussion between Robert and me. "I want Marcus there," Robert said one evening as we were addressing invitations. "He's my son. I love him, even if he's being an ass about this." "Then we should invite him," I said. "But Robert, if he comes, he might bring someone as his +1. "You mean Sarah?" "I think it's likely, yes." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Would that bother you? Having your ex-fiancé and your sister at our wedding? It would make things more complicated," I admitted. "But this is our day. If Marcus wants to be there and if you want him there, then that's what matters." What I didn't tell Robert was that having Marcus and Sarah at our wedding would be the perfect culmination of my revenge. Watching them watch me marry his father, seeing them squirm through the ceremony, knowing they'd have to smile and congratulate us afterward, it would be absolutely delicious. We sent Marcus an invitation with a simple note. "We hope you'll be there to celebrate with us. Love, Dad and Amy." We didn't get a response for 2 weeks. Then, 3 days before the wedding, Marcus called Robert. "I'll be there," he said simply, "and I'm bringing Sarah." "Good," Robert said, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm glad you'll be there. Dad, I want you to know that I still think this is a mistake, but I love you. And if Amy makes you happy, then I'll try to accept it. That's all I'm asking for, son." "And Amy?" Marcus's voice was directed at me, though I was only hearing one side of the conversation. "Yes? I hope you know what you're doing." The wedding day arrived with perfect October weather, crisp and clear, with the kind of golden light that makes everything look like a painting. I woke up in the bridal suite at the Vineyard, surrounded by my closest friends who'd come to help me get ready. My mother was there, fussing over my dress and crying every few minutes. My college roommate was doing my hair, chattering about how romantic the whole thing was. My cousin was in charge of makeup, making sure I looked perfect for photos. But the person I kept thinking about was Sarah. She was noticeably absent from my bridal preparations, which was both expected and somehow disappointing. We'd always talked about being in each other's weddings, about being the support system for each other's biggest day. Now she was somewhere else in the Vineyard, probably getting ready to watch me marry her boyfriend's father while pretending to be happy for me. "You look absolutely radiant," my mother said as she helped me into my dress. It was a simple but elegant A-line in ivory silk, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing train. Robert had insisted on buying it for me as a wedding gift, and he'd chosen perfectly. It was sophisticated and timeless, and made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "Do you think Robert will like it?" I asked, and my mother laughed. "Sweetheart, that man would think you were beautiful if you were wearing a garbage bag. The way he looks at you. It reminds me of how your father looked at me when we were first married." "Really? Really? You found a good one, Amy. A man who truly adores you." As I was putting on my jewelry, pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, the sapphire necklace Robert had given me as an engagement gift, there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I called, expecting one of the wedding coordinators. Instead, Sarah walked in. She was wearing a navy blue dress that was appropriate for a fall wedding, and she'd done her hair and makeup carefully, but she looked pale and strained around the eyes. "Sarah," I said, genuinely surprised, "I didn't expect to see you before the ceremony. I wanted to talk to you," she said, glancing around at the other women in the room. Privately, my mother and friends took the hint and excused themselves, leaving Sarah and me alone in the bridal suite. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, and her voice was hollow. "Thank you. Amy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Do you know about Marcus and me?" The question hung in the air between us. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating for months, the moment when the lies and pretense would finally fall away, when we'd have to confront the truth of what had happened between us. "Yes," I said simply. "I know." Sarah's face crumpled, and she sank into one of the chairs by the window. "How long have you known?" "Since the night I came home early and saw you together in my bedroom." "Oh God." Sarah put her head in her hands. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. It just did." "How long?" I asked. 6 months, she whispered. "It started about 2 weeks after you got engaged." 2 weeks after I got engaged, I repeated. "So while I was planning my wedding to Marcus, you were falling in love with him?" "Yes." "While you were helping me address invitations and pick out flowers and taste cakes, you were sleeping with my fiancé?" "Yes." "While you were acting like my supportive sister, my maid of honor, my best friend, you were betraying me in the worst possible way." Sarah looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Amy, I know how it looks, but I never meant to hurt you. We tried to stop it. We knew it was wrong." "But you didn't stop it." "No, we didn't stop it. Because you loved him more than you loved me." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that, Sarah. You had a choice between being loyal to your sister and being with Marcus, and you chose Marcus." Sarah was crying harder now, her makeup ruining, her careful appearance falling apart. "Amy, please, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, moving to the mirror to check my own appearance. The conversation was affecting me less than I'd expected. Maybe because I was finally getting the confession I'd wanted, or maybe because I was about to marry a man who loved me infinitely more than Marcus ever had. What I don't understand is why you're telling me this now, on my wedding day. Because I can't stand it anymore, Sarah said. I can't stand watching you do this. Do what? Marry Robert to hurt us. I turned to face her fully. You think I'm marrying Robert to hurt you? Aren't you? Sarah, I'm marrying Robert because I love him. Because he's an incredible man who sees me and values me and wants to build a life with me. Because he makes me happier than I've ever been. But you wouldn't have even looked at him if it weren't for Marcus and me. You're right, I said. If you and Marcus hadn't betrayed me, I probably would have married Marcus and spent the rest of my life in a mediocre relationship with a man who didn't really appreciate me. So in a way, I should thank you. Your affair led me to the love of my life. Sarah stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Amy, you're about to become my stepmother-in-law. Do you understand how twisted that is? I'm about to become Robert's wife, I corrected. The family dynamics are secondary to that. Are they? Or is this all about revenge? I looked at Sarah for a long moment, this woman who had been my sister, my confidant, my partner in crime for our entire lives, and I realized something surprising. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't even really hate Marcus. What they'd done had led me to Robert, had led me to a love I never could have imagined. In some strange way, their betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Sarah, if I wanted revenge, I would have exposed your affair months ago. I would have told everyone at Marcus's job about what he was doing. I would have called Mom and Dad and told them about their perfect daughter's behavior. I would have made sure everyone in our family knew exactly what kind of person you really are. Sarah's face went even whiter. She hadn't considered those possibilities. Instead, I quietly ended my engagement to Marcus and moved on with my life. I found love with a man who deserves me. I'm about to marry the most wonderful man I've ever met, and I'm going to be happy. If that feels like punishment to you, maybe you should ask yourself why. But Amy, Sarah, in 20 minutes I'm going to walk down the aisle and marry Robert Chen. You can sit in that audience with Marcus and watch it happen, or you can leave. But you cannot stop it, and you cannot make me feel guilty about it. We could tell Robert, Sarah said desperately. We could tell him that you know about us, that you're only marrying him to get back at us. You could, I agreed. But Robert knows I was engaged to Marcus. He knows we broke up. He knows I had feelings for Marcus that I don't have anymore. What he also knows is that I love him completely and genuinely, that I'm committed to building a life with him, that I make him happier than he's ever been. Do you think he'd choose to believe you, or believe the ex-fiancé and the sister who've been lying and sneaking around for months? Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat. She knew as well as I did that Robert wouldn't believe them, and even if he had doubts, he loved me too much to call off the wedding based on accusations from people who'd already proven themselves untrustworthy. Amy, please, she said one last time. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything to you, Sarah. I'm marrying the man I love. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. There was a knock on the door, and my mother peeked in. Amy, sweetheart, it's time. I'll be right there, I said, then turned back to Sarah. Are you staying for the ceremony? Yes, she whispered. Good. I hope you can find a way to be happy for me. And Sarah? After today, we're family. You're going to be dating my stepson. I suggest you figure out how to be respectful. I left Sarah sitting in the bridal suite and walked out to marry the love of my life. The ceremony was perfect. The vineyard was decorated with white roses and eucalyptus, the autumn light was golden and warm, and the small group of our closest family and friends created exactly the intimate atmosphere we'd wanted. I walked down the aisle alone, by choice, and when I saw Robert waiting for me at the altar, my heart swelled with genuine love and joy. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, and his face was full of wonder and adoration as he watched me approach. Marcus and Sarah were sitting in the third row, and I could feel their eyes on me as I passed, but I didn't look at them. This moment was about Robert and me, about the life we were choosing to build together. You look incredible, Robert whispered as I reached him. So do you, I whispered back. The officiant was a friend of Robert's, an elderly architect who'd known him for 20 years. He spoke about love as a choice, about partnership as a daily commitment, about building a life together like building a beautiful structure, with intention, care, and attention to every detail. When it was time for vows, Robert went first. Amy, he said, taking my hands. 6 months ago, I thought I was too old for this kind of love. I thought I'd missed my chance at finding someone who truly understood me, who challenged me, who made me want to be the best version of myself. Then you walked into my office and everything changed. You didn't just change my perspective on architecture or design, you changed my perspective on life. You reminded me that it's never too late to find your person, to build something beautiful together. I promise to love you with intention and care every day. I promise to support your dreams and share mine with you. I promise to build a life with you that's worthy of the incredible woman you are. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, including mine. My vows were simpler but no less heartfelt. Robert, you taught me the difference between settling and choosing. For too long, I thought love was about finding someone you could be comfortable with. You showed me that real love is about finding someone who makes you braver, smarter, more yourself than you ever thought possible. You see me in ways I didn't even see myself. You believe in my dreams before I'm brave enough to voice them. You make me feel beautiful and brilliant and capable of anything. I promise to love you completely, to challenge you lovingly, to build a life with you that's everything we've both been dreaming of. When we kissed as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous despite the small crowd. Robert lifted me off my feet and spun me around, both of us laughing with pure joy. The reception was held in the vineyard's beautiful stone courtyard, with twinkling lights strung overhead and tables arranged around a small dance floor. The food was incredible, the wine was perfect, and the atmosphere was exactly what we'd hoped for: intimate, elegant, and full of love. I watched Marcus and Sarah throughout the evening, noting how they tried to appear normal while clearly struggling with the reality of what had just happened. They sat at the same table but barely spoke to each other, both of them looking like they were at a funeral rather than a wedding. During the father-son dance, a tradition Robert had insisted on, where he danced with me while Marcus danced with Elena, I caught Marcus's eye over his mother's shoulder. The look on his face was one of complete defeat, like he finally understood what he'd lost and what I'd gained. Later, during the bouquet toss, Sarah didn't even try to catch it. She stood at the back of the group of single women, looking miserable, while my college roommate snatched the flowers out of the air with a triumphant laugh. But the moment that made everything worth it came during the last dance of the evening. Robert and I were swaying together to a jazz standard, completely lost in each other, when he whispered in my ear, "Thank you for saying yes to this life with me." "Thank you for asking," I whispered back. "I love you, Mrs. Chen." "I love you too, Mr. Chen." As we danced, I caught sight of Marcus and Sarah leaving early, slipping out of the reception without saying goodbye. They looked defeated, diminished somehow, like people who'd realized they'd made a terrible mistake but had no idea how to fix it. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. They'd chosen betrayal and lies, I'd chosen love and honesty. They'd chosen each other, I'd chosen better. The honeymoon was 3 weeks in Europe, France, Italy, and Spain, visiting architectural sites Robert had always wanted to show me. We stayed in beautiful hotels, ate incredible food, and spent hours walking through cities that had been built over centuries by people who understood the value of creating something beautiful and lasting. In Paris, we toured Notre Dame and talked about resilience and rebuilding. In Rome, we wandered through ancient ruins and discussed what it means to leave a legacy. In Barcelona, we marveled at Gaudi's organic architecture and dreamed about the house we wanted to build together. But the most perfect moment came in a small village in Tuscany, where we were staying in a converted monastery with views over rolling hills covered in vineyards. We were sitting on our private terrace at sunset, sharing a bottle of wine and planning our future. "I want to design our house," Robert said, sketching ideas on a napkin. "Something that's completely ours, that reflects who we are together." "Where?" I asked. "Wherever you want. We could stay in the city, or we could find some land in the country. We could build something modern, or something that looks like it's been there for 100 years. What do you want?" "I want a house where we can host dinner parties and have deep conversations with interesting people. I want a kitchen where we can cook together, and a library where we can read together, and a garden where we can grow old together." "I want all of that too," I said, curling up next to him on the love seat. "But mostly I just want it with you." "Good," he said, kissing the top of my head, "because you're stuck with me now." We came back from our honeymoon refreshed and ready to start our married life. Robert had already started the preliminary designs for our dream house, and I was launching my marketing firm with him as my first major client. The family dynamics took some time to settle into a new normal. Marcus and Sarah were still together, but their relationship seemed strained, shadowed by guilt and the awkwardness of our new family structure. Family gatherings were initially tense, with everyone trying to navigate the strange reality of me being Marcus's stepmother at the age of 28. The first real test came at Thanksgiving, 2 months after our wedding. Elena had insisted on hosting a big family dinner, determined to prove that we could all be civilized adults despite the unusual circumstances. I spent the morning helping Elena in the kitchen, something I'd always enjoyed but which now felt different. I was no longer the girlfriend of her younger son. I was the wife of her older son, an official member of the family with my own place and status. "You seem happy," Elena said as we were preparing the turkey. "Marriage suits you?" "It does," I agreed. "Robert makes me very happy, and you make him happy too. I haven't seen him this content in years." Marcus and Sarah arrived late, looking like they'd had an argument in the car. Sarah was particularly uncomfortable, barely making eye contact with me and speaking only when directly addressed. During dinner, when Elena was asking about everyone's plans for the holidays, the conversation turned to the house Robert and I were planning to build. "We're hoping to break ground in the spring," Robert said, his arm around my chair. "Amy has some incredible ideas about how to integrate the interior design with the architectural concept." "Where are you building?" David asked. "We found 20 acres about 30 minutes north of the city," I said. "It has incredible views and enough space for the kind of gardens we want to create." "That sounds wonderful," Elena said. "You'll have to host Christmas there next year." "We'd love to," I said, and I noticed Sarah wince slightly at the implication that I'd be hosting family holidays as the lady of our own house. After dinner, I was in the kitchen helping with dishes when Marcus appeared beside me. "Amy, can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Of course." We stepped out onto the back patio, away from the rest of the family. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said without preamble. "For what?" "For cheating on you. For lying to you. For not being the man you deserved." I looked at him for a moment, this man I'd once thought I'd spend my life with, and realized that I felt nothing but mild indifference toward him. "Apology accepted," I said. "That's it? What else is there to say, Marcus? You made your choices, I made mine. We're both where we want to be now." "Are we?" he asked. "Because Sarah and things have been complicated." "How so?" "She feels guilty about what we did to you. And now with you being married to my dad, she feels like you won somehow." "I did win," I said simply. "I won because I ended up with a man who loves me completely, who respects me, who wants to build a life with me. Whether that's because of what you and Sarah did or in spite of it doesn't really matter." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Do you love him? Really love him? Or is this all about getting back at us?" "Marcus, if this were about getting back at you, don't you think I would have found a more direct way to hurt you? I could have exposed your affair, ruined your reputation, made your life miserable in a dozen different ways. Instead, I quietly ended our engagement and moved on with my life. I found love with someone who's perfect for me. If that feels like punishment to you, maybe you should examine why. But you have to admit, there's something fucked up about you marrying my father. There's something fucked up about you sleeping with my sister while we were engaged," I countered. At least I waited until we were broken up before I started seeing someone else. Marcus had no response to that. "Marcus, I'm going to say this once, and then we're never going to discuss it again," I said, keeping my voice level and calm. "I am married to your father. That makes me your stepmother. We can have a cordial, respectful relationship, or we can have no relationship at all. But you cannot continue to act like I've done something wrong by finding happiness after you betrayed me. And if you can't handle the family dynamics, then you need to remove yourself from family situations. But I'm not going anywhere. This is my family now." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him finally understanding the full implications of what had happened. He'd lost me, but more than that, he'd put himself in a position where he'd have to watch me be happy with someone else at every family gathering for the rest of his life. "I understand," he said finally. "Good." We went back inside, and the rest of the evening passed without incident. But I noticed that Marcus was quieter, more subdued, like someone who'd finally accepted a reality he couldn't change. Sarah avoided me for the rest of the evening, but as they were leaving, she approached me while everyone else was saying goodbye in the living room. "Amy," she said quietly, "I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for what Marcus and I did, but for everything. For lying to you, for betraying you, for being a terrible sister." "Okay," I said. Is there any chance could we ever be sisters again? I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw a woman who was genuinely remorseful but also completely lost. Her relationship with Marcus was clearly in trouble. She'd destroyed her relationship with me, and she was struggling to figure out who she was in this new reality. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I need space from you. I need to focus on my marriage and my new life. Maybe someday we can find a way to be family again, but it's going to take time. How much time? I don't know. Maybe years. Maybe forever. That's up to you. What do you mean? I mean, you need to figure out who you want to be, Sarah. You need to decide if you want to be the kind of person who destroys relationships for selfish reasons, or if you want to be the kind of person who builds them. When you figure that out, we can talk. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I understand. As they left, I watched through the window as Marcus and Sarah got into their car. They didn't speak to each other during the entire process of leaving, and Marcus's face was grim as he started the engine. You handled that well, Robert said, appearing beside me and wrapping his arms around me from behind. It needed to be said. How do you feel? Free, I said, leaning back against his chest. For the first time in months, I feel completely free. Free from what? From anger. From the need for revenge. From caring what they think or feel about our marriage. Good, Robert said, kissing my neck. Because I want all of your energy focused on our future, not their past. Spring came early that year, and we broke ground on our house in March. Watching Robert's design come to life was like watching poetry become architecture. Every room, every window, every detail was planned with intention and care. We were on site almost every day, watching the foundation being poured, the walls going up, the roof taking shape. Robert was in his element, collaborating with the contractors, solving problems, making sure every detail was perfect. This is the kitchen, he'd say, walking me through the framed-out space, where we'll cook together every Sunday morning. This is the library, where we'll read together on winter evenings. This is the master bedroom with windows facing east, so we'll wake up with the sunrise. By summer, the house was taking real shape, and we could see how beautiful it was going to be. It was modern but warm, sophisticated but comfortable, the kind of house that would age gracefully and hold a lifetime of memories. We moved in just before Christmas, 11 months after our wedding. The house was everything we'd dreamed of and more, spacious enough for entertaining, intimate enough for quiet evenings together, beautiful enough to take your breath away. On New Year's Eve, we hosted our first party in the new house. We invited close friends, Robert's business partners, some of my new clients, and yes, even Marcus and Sarah. They came separately, I noticed. Sarah arrived alone, looking elegant but sad in a black cocktail dress. Marcus came with a date, a woman I didn't recognize, someone blonde and young and uncomplicated looking. They broke up, Elena whispered to me during the party. About a month ago, I think. Really? Marcus said they realized they weren't right for each other. Sarah's been staying with friends. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy for Sarah, but it passed quickly. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. The party was a huge success. People raved about the house, about the food, about the atmosphere Robert and I had created together. We were clearly a couple who belonged together, who'd built something beautiful and meaningful. Near midnight, I found myself standing on our back deck, looking out over the garden we'd planted together, thinking about how dramatically my life had changed in just over a year. "Penny for your thoughts," Robert said, joining me with 2 glasses of champagne. "Just thinking about how different everything is from last New Year's Eve. Better or worse?" "Infinitely better," I said, taking the champagne and leaning against him. "Last year I was planning a wedding to the wrong man. This year I'm married to the right one, and living in our dream house, and running a successful business, and completely, utterly happy. Are you?" Robert asked, turning to face me. "Completely happy?" "Completely," I said, and I meant it. "Are you?" "I've never been happier in my life," he said. "Amy, you saved me. I was becoming a bitter, lonely old man, and you reminded me what it feels like to be young and in love and excited about the future." "You saved me too," I said. "You showed me what real love looks like, what partnership looks like, what it means to be with someone who truly sees you." Inside, people were starting the countdown to midnight. 10, 9, 8. "I love you, Amy Chen," Robert said. "I love you too, Robert Chen." 7, 6, 5. "Here's to our first year of marriage." 4, 3, 2. "And to all the years to come." 1. "Happy New Year, my love." As we kissed at the stroke of midnight, with our friends cheering inside and fireworks lighting up the sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had broken my heart had led me to the love of my life. The sister who'd hurt me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift imaginable. The man who'd cheated on me had freed me to find someone infinitely better. I thought about Marcus and Sarah, wherever they were tonight, dealing with the consequences of their choices. I thought about the family dynamics that would continue to be complicated, the holidays that would always be slightly awkward, the reality that I'd be Marcus's stepmother until the day I died. But mostly, I thought about Robert. Kind, brilliant, loving Robert, and the life we were building together. A life based on honesty and respect and genuine partnership. A life where I was seen and valued and cherished every single day. The revenge I'd planned had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, but not in the way I'd expected. I'd set out to hurt the people who'd hurt me, and instead I'd found a love so powerful and transformative that it had made their betrayal irrelevant. I was no longer the woman who'd been naive enough to be blindsided by an affair. I was no longer the woman who'd settled for comfortable instead of demanding extraordinary. I was no longer the woman who'd put everyone else's feelings before her own. I was Amy Chen, successful businesswoman, beloved wife, woman who'd turned betrayal into triumph and heartbreak into the greatest love story of her life. And as I stood on the deck of the house my husband had designed for us, surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about us, married to a man who worshipped the ground I walked on, I realized that the best revenge really was living well. Better than well, actually. Living extraordinarily. Living happily ever after.